Hi, I'm John Atack, and this is a review of Making Manson, Charles Manson Unfiltered, by Renowned Films, shown on the Peacock platform in November 2024. They lead by saying this is an explosive series offering unfiltered insights into America's most notorious killer, Charles Manson. Through 20 years' worth of never before aired conversations, those closest to the case have their views challenged. Manson recounts the early crimes that led to the murder spree in the summer of 1969, laying out an explanation of loyalty and brotherhood that pushes against the accepted motive, his desire to incite helter-skelter. Renowned Films' Making Manson is very watchable because it's beautifully filmed and expertly edited. However, Renowned edited out certain well-known facts to fit the story to their plot. They set out to prove that Charles Manson did not cause the Tate LaBianca murders. He did. I was approached in October 2023, just over a year ago, by Sophie Howard at Renowned Films. They'd noticed some comments I'd made on YouTube videos about Charles Manson and Scientology. We had two 40-minute conversations, and a third meeting was scheduled with the senior producer. They cancelled with 1 day's notice. I'd already put in about 6 months' work researching Manson. I was amazed by what I'd found. The evidence is already in the record, but its significance has been overlooked. As Manson himself has said, he got pretty heavily involved in Dianetics and Scientology. Renowned wanted me to share my research, but with no offer of recompense. I would be giving away 6 months' hard work and sharing hard-won revelations for nothing in return. Renowned rely upon 18 years of recorded phone conversations between Manson and John Michael Jones. All 3 episodes are prefaced by Jones' statement, "Anything ever written about Manson is contradicted in these tapes." In fact, in the whole 3 hours, only one new piece of information is offered. Manson's claim to have murdered people on a beach in Mexico and left the gun behind. There is no supporting evidence for this claim. And the documentary makes much of his claim that he had no blood on his hands, while including this evident contradiction. Otherwise, there's no evidence and no conjecture that has not been published before. The horrors of Manson's childhood have been thoroughly explored, along with his many crimes, his time in prison, and his travels with the so-called family from his first meeting with Mary Brunner in San Francisco in the spring of 1967 to his arrest in Los Angeles in December 1969. I do have new evidence, and I will reveal it when the time comes, but for the moment, I want to address some of the misinformation and misdirection in this documentary. Stephen Parent was the first victim at the Tate House. His brother was 13 at the time, and he recounts the devastation caused to his family. Both of their parents became alcoholics, and the brother grew up willing to go to prison if it gave him a chance to kill Manson. The filmmakers persuaded the brother that Manson had not instructed Tex Watson to commit the murders. Although accepting his claim to murders in Mexico, the documentary presents Manson as a man who was not guilty of murder. They completely ignore Manson's conviction for his participation in the murder of Donald Shea. In fact, they make no mention of this murder. James Buddy Day also taped his interviews with Manson, made during the last year of Manson's life, and made a documentary and wrote a book defending Manson. He argued that there had been no race war, no helter-skelter, as does the present documentary. Day accepted Manson's word with the belief that Manson honoured a prison code that made him trustworthy. However, even if cons don't lie to each other, that does not mean they won't lie to everyone else. Manson clearly lied to his gang. He also contradicted himself. He is not a trustworthy source of information. James Buddy Day has already made the key arguments presented in this documentary. Manson spent decades denying his guilt, and that's often been reported. On the Today talk show, James Buddy Day confidently asserted that members of the gang had told him Manson had never talked about helter-skelter or a race war. Interviewer Megyn Kelly turned to Diane Lake, former member of the Manson family and a major contributor to the current documentary, to be told that Manson talked about helter-skelter and race war all the time. In the current piece, Lake's fellow family member Kathy Shaw also talks about the race war. I spoke with Renowned about Tex Watson's use of a deliriant drug. Sophie Howard accepted that I had proved this was not belladonna, as has always been reported, but datura. Watson blacked out for 10 days after he took a massive dose of the drug at Spahn's movie ranch in April 1969. He came to 30 miles from his starting point, crawling on his hands and knees in a group of school children and only able to say, "Beep, beep." Datura can stay in the system. Manson has said that Watson was taking it at the time of the murders. It makes LSD look insignificant. Watson and Atkins have also said that despite Manson's ban, they both took amphetamines. This documentary mentions amphetamines, but not Manson's prohibition of them. Renowned is based in the UK, so you should be aware of our 2015 Coercive Control Act. This law recognises that influence does not require force, intimidation, or the threat of force. People can be persuaded to act against their own interests, even to the point of suicide. While there were a couple of psychological experts on the shows, there was no expert on influence, the field I've worked in for more than 4 decades. Renowned did approach at least one other expert on influence, but decided that an understanding of systematic manipulation was not necessary. This, despite knowing that Manson had spent 14 months studying Scientology, the most elaborate set of control techniques ever devised. Scientology taught him how to recruit and maintain the membership of his followers. Surely, if you knew Manson had spent 14 months studying a system of control, you'd want to know more. There is no mention of Scientology in the documentary. All the more surprising as 2 other family members were Scientologists and 2 other members were rescued from the family by an independent Scientologist. Manson was on the receiving end of 150 hours of Scientology's processing, their own word. I have traced every procedure that was used on him during his 14-month indoctrination. Manson obeyed commands to explore his past and develop false memories. I have located the specific Scientology process that brought Manson to believe that he was a reincarnation of Jesus Christ. Manson frequently told followers he was the second coming of Christ and named other gang members reincarnations of New Testament figures. The only references to this vital point in the documentary are Diane Lake's passing comment about his staging the crucifixion and Manson's statement that he is man's son, without the explanation that this refers to Jesus' title as the Son of Man. It is impossible to understand the Manson killings without understanding his insistence that he was the second coming of Christ. The documentary says that Manson used LSD to embed hypnotic suggestions in gang members. Literature on LSD does not support its use as a hypnotic drug. In the 60s, drugs of the barbiturate group, and especially sodium pentothal, were being used for this purpose. But the CIA's massive research project into LSD decided it was useful to confuse, but not to control people. What Manson actually used were the mind control techniques he had learned during his 14 months of Scientology indoctrination and processing. I know exactly how this worked, and I would have shared it with Renowned, but they already had a story and perhaps paid too much to John Michael Jones to be able to afford not to tell that story. A shame, because they are really good storytellers. I'm working on a book and a documentary that will show how Manson gained control of his followers. Watch this space. Thank you very much for your time. Hi, John here. Thanks for watching. We'd appreciate it very much if you would click like, as well as subscribe and click the bell for notifications. Every dollar helps, and we welcome new patrons on Patreon, or you can make a one-off payment with any currency through PayPal. Thanks so much.